Our friend, let your room sink into a gentle darkness where the light of the long day retreats, leaving only your own slow, warm breath. If a fae turn off the lights, my den is spinning. Let its hum become a steady background music, like the heartbeat of the night. Now lie down, pull the covers to your chest, and close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Hold it for a moment, then breathe out slowly. Let all the stress of today float away with that breath. Tonight, we will journey to a distant era, the Middle Ages. A world where life was not romantic, like in the movies or fairy tales, but full of hardship, toil, and jobs that are unsettling to even hear about. But do not be afraid. You do not have to endure it. You only need to listen, to let the story carry you away, like a small boat drifting down the river of memory. In this darkness, imagine you are in a rustic wooden house. On the table, a candle flickers, its thin yellow light painting trembling shadows on the wall. Outside, the wind whistles through the cracks in the door, carrying the scent of dry straw, damp earth, and in the distance, the deep, slow toll of a church bell. The medieval town is asleep, but some people are still awake, doing the things that no one wants to speak of, yet are essential for the community to survive. Tonight, we will walk slowly through the dark alleys, slip into the smoky workshops, wade through the cold mud of ponds, or stand beside the blazing heat of a kiln. We will meet people with professions that are not glamorous, not prestigious, but they keep the city from being swallowed by its own filth, dust, and death. And as you listen to their every step, their every breath, you will see one thing. Dignity lies not in the title of a job, but in the way people silently struggle to keep society intact. So continue to breathe slowly. Inhale and exhale. Everything is ready. The story is about to begin. We will meet the first person, someone who leaves home, just as the night bell falls silent, a wooden bucket in hand, walking slowly toward the deep pit where the whole town entrusts what everyone wants to forget. Imagine, the night bell has just stopped ringing. The cobblestone street is silent, holding only the dampness of the night dew and a few faint streaks of light from a lantern hanging on a wooden post. In that darkness, a man walks, carrying a heavy wooden bucket, an old shovel over his shoulder. He is the gong farmer, a profession the whole town needs, but no one wants to say its name. Gong, not a musical instrument. Here it is slang for human waste. And his job is to collect it from the privies, from the public latrines, from the dark alleys behind the houses, to carry it outside the city walls. A job, quiet, foul-smelling, and never seen in the light of day. He works at night, not because he wants secrecy, but because the people do not want to see nor smell. The city needs him, but pretends he does not exist. Only the darkness and the pungent stench acknowledge his presence. Climbing down into a deep pit, he scoops out pail after pail, bucket after bucket. Rotten wood creaks under his feet. The air is thick, heavy, so much so that every breath burns his throat. Sometimes methane gas rises, making the lantern flicker, as if the flame itself wants to flee. Some have fallen right in the pit, suffocated or slipped, leaving behind an obituary no one dares to read aloud. But in return, this job pays better than many others. Some are even paid more than carpenters or roofers. It is compensation for the price of the stench, the shunning, and the danger that lurks every night. That wage is often enough for a family to have an extra loaf of bread, a piece of fatty meat during the winter. His tools are simple: a wooden bucket, a long-handled ladle, sometimes a donkey, to pull the cart waste out of the city gates. That waste is then dumped at a designated site or used as fertilizer on the fields. In that cycle, the stench becomes the source of life for the new harvest. But society is not kind. The gong farmer is seen as unclean. No one invites them to parties, and no one wants to sit near them. They find their only friends among their colleagues, standing together under the moonlight, breathing the same heavy air, and occasionally sharing a bitter laugh about who had a worse day. And that smell, you never get used to it. You just learn to stop complaining. Then one day, it becomes a part of you, like a shadow that always follows. Try to breathe in deeply, then breathe out slowly. In this imaginary breath, you will feel the heaviness gradually fade. Because behind that dreadful job, there is still something quiet and noble. Without them, the cobblestone streets, the squares, even the majestic cathedrals, would quickly be submerged in humanity's own digestive legacy. They do not carry swords, they do not wear shining armor, but every night, bucket by bucket, they keep the city clean, so that the dawn can still rise over the red-tiled roofs. The silent heroes recognized only by the stench that all despise, yet cannot live without. So as you gently close your eyes, remember that even in the jobs considered the lowliest, there is resilience and dignity. Inhale deeply and exhale slowly. You are still safe, still warm, as the story carries you on. In another place, not the city's cesspit, but the swamps out there, another person is doing a job no less strange. Standing still in the mud to harvest leeches. Imagine you leave the damp, dark street of the town, walk across the silent fields, moving further from the lantern light. The air becomes cooler, heavy with moisture. Before you is a sprawling swamp, where the still water reflects the dim moonlight like a broken mirror. This is the workplace of the leech collectors. The job sounds simple. Step into the pond, stand still, and let the leeches come to you. No modern protective gear, no rubber boots, no gloves. Only cold, bare feet, submerged in the muddy water, and a quiet resignation. Try to close your eyes. Feel the cold water slowly creeping up to your calves. At first, it's just a sting, but then small movements wriggle and squirm. The leeches silently attaching to the skin, seeking the warm blood. A tingling, itching sensation, both uncomfortable and helpless. You do nothing but wait for them to feed until they are full, then gently peel them off and put them in the glass jar hanging at your side. The only sounds around you are the croaking of frogs, the sloshing of water as someone shifts their weight, and the tiny pop as a plump leech is pulled from the skin. And so, hour after hour, you become living bait for nature. Leeches, they sound horrifying, but they were once one of the precious medicines of medieval medicine. Headaches, fevers, melancholy, even plagues, all were cured by letting blood flow out. And to have hundreds, thousands of leeches for the physicians, people like this were needed, planting themselves in the swamps every day. The pay was next to nothing, just a few coins, sometimes just a little food. But for the poorest, it was still a way out, even if the price was paid in small bleeding wounds, the risk of infection, and the exhaustion from blood loss. You can imagine stepping out of the pond, your skin mottled with purple marks, your legs trembling. A few leeches still cling on, swollen, shamelessly sucking the last drops. And then, with just a pinch of salt or a touch of hot coal, they finally release. The collector lets out a weary breath, stumbles away, but still clutches the full jar as if it were their only treasure. Socially, no one wanted to be near them. No one would sit next to someone who smelled of swamp mud, with bleeding wounds and a web of scars. But strangely, it was thanks to them that physicians had medicine to treat the sick, and the city could hold on to the fragile belief that illness could be fought off. Take a deep breath and exhale slowly. Let the image of that misty swamp dissolve, leaving only stillness. You are still here, safe, no longer feeling the sting of stagnant water or the tingling of tiny creatures. And then, as the night mist thickens, a distant church bell tolls, reminding us that in the city there's a job even more dreadful, burying the victims of the Black Death. A heavy, silent task, shrouded in the smell of death. Let your imagination take you back into the city. Late at night, the church bell rings long and low, dissolving into a mist as thick as the breath of a tormented community. In the dark alleys, there are not only silent figures carrying buckets, but also other shadows, carrying shovels, shrouds, and a chilling silence. They are the plague burial collectors, a job no one wanted, but which became necessary when death spread faster than wildfire. Close your eyes and listen to the sound of an iron shovel digging into damp earth. Thud after thud, like the slow heartbeats of a dying night. The soil is heavy, wet, clinging to hands, to shoes, to the hem of a coat. The pit deepens, widens, not for one person to rest in peace, but for many to lie together. A mass grave where fates meet in silence. The air here is thick, a mixture of freshly turned earth and the scents of wormwood, vinegar, and garlic that people believed could ward off the poisonous vapors. But these were all just thin veils over fear. The burial collectors worked with faces covered in wet rags, their hands calloused, and their eyes trying not to linger on the lifeless forms brought to them. The sound of creaking wooden wheels announces the arrival of bodies, loosely wrapped in cloth, sometimes just an old bedsheet. Occasionally, among the bundles, there might be a chicken, a bouquet of dried flowers, or a small cross, fragile tokens of hope for another world. The collectors had no time to stop, to distinguish, or to mourn. They just dug, placed, and covered, dug, placed, and covered. Like a sad, repetitive song that played out day after day. In the eyes of the townspeople, they were a bad omen. No one wanted to come near. No one wanted to talk. They were avoided like the plague they were handling. When they appeared at the market, others would immediately turn away, pretending to be busy elsewhere. A cold, stark loneliness right in the middle of a crowd. The pay was meager, sometimes just a few coins or a hard loaf of bread, but the real reward was simply to keep on living, a gamble taken every day, because many burial collectors became the very ones they buried, after a cough, a fever, or just a small itchy spot on their arm. And yet, there was a quiet solace. It was they who kept the city from collapsing completely. It was they who kept the streets from turning into an open graveyard. They were the last line of defense, not with swords and spears, but with shovels, earth, and the courage to face death every day. Inhale and exhale slowly. Let that smell of death fade from your imagination, leaving only the sound of dirt pattering into the pit. You are still here, safe, lying in a warm bed, listening to this story drift by slowly, like a thin thread connecting you to a distant past. And as dawn has yet to break, on the edge of town, in a small hut, another person begins their shift, not with shovels and corpses, but with a vat of woolen cloth, soaking in a liquid just as pungent. Barefoot, they tread upon the thick solution to turn coarse wool into soft fabric. That person is a wool fuller. Imagine you've just left the damp, heavy-smelling plague pit, walking a little further to the edge of town. There you find low wooden houses with thatched roofs, set apart from the residential areas, not for luxury, but because no one could stand the smell from this place. This is the wool fuller's workshop. You step inside, and immediately, a pungent odor assaults your nose, a mixture of water, earth, and human urine. In the Middle Ages, this was no joke, but a real ingredient. People collected stale urine, let it ferment to produce ammonia. This solution could soften the coarse wool fibers, which were greasy and rough as sandpaper. In the dark workshop, large wooden vats are placed side by side. Inside, coarse woolen cloths soak in the thick liquid. And the fuller's job is to step in, using their own feet to tread and tread and tread, for hours on end. Each heavy step, like a winemaker who has strayed into a less romantic profession. Try closing your eyes, imagining your bare feet sinking into that warm, foul-smelling solution. With each stomp, the liquid splashes up, clinging to your calves, seeping into your skin, leaving a stinging, uncomfortable sensation. The air is thick, humid, and hot, making the whole room feel like a steam chamber. The more you tread, the more your sweat mixes in, the stronger the smell becomes, and all you can do is gasp for breath through a cloth hastily wrapped around your face. This job was not only exhausting, but also hazardous to health. Many fullers suffered from trench foot, their skin blistering from the ammonia, or developed strange rashes that were called by fearsome names like God's curse. But no one stopped because the demand for wool was endless. In the cold of winter, in a life of scarcity, clothing was essential, and wool was the king of all fabrics. Wool fullers were never respected. They were rarely invited to feasts, and if they were often seated in the farthest corner. The smell of their trade followed them like a shadow, but despite being shunned, they knew their work was necessary. Thanks to them, rough cloths were transformed into soft cloaks and warm blankets, helping others to endure the long winter. Inhale and exhale slowly. Imagine leaving that workshop, letting the pungent smell fade from your mind. All that remains is a faint image, wooden vats and bare feet, treading with the steady rhythm of an ancient drum. And then, as you look up, the wind rushes in again, carrying the sound of creaking wood and screeching ropes from a construction site. There, other people are not treading in water, but walking inside a giant suspended wheel. To lift heavy stone blocks high into the air, they are the treadwheel crane operators, the human hamsters of cathedral construction. Leaving the foul-smelling fuller's workshop, you follow a dirt path to a vast construction site. High above, the stone walls of a cathedral are slowly rising, majestic as if challenging the gray sky. But to lift those massive stone blocks, there were no modern machines, only a giant wooden wheel, and inside were people. Imagine a wheel as tall as a house, set upright, with ropes as thick as an arm wrapped around its axle. Inside, a person walks, round and round, like a caged hamster. But the difference is, each of their steps is not for play, but to lift a stone block many times their own weight. Try to close your eyes, hear the creaking wood, the straining ropes, the slow scraping of stone. With each step, their feet pound on the dry wood, making the whole wheel shudder. Panting, sweat soaking their shirt, their hands grip a crossbar to keep their balance. On the ground below, others shout, adjust, and signal. But inside the wheel, all they feel is their own ragged breath, and the fear that one misstep could cause the rope to snap, the stone to fall, and the project, along with many lives, to end in an instant. This job was an endless endurance test, from morning to evening, from evening to dusk, walking and walking some more. Occasionally, someone would hand them a piece of bread or a sip of water, and then the endless rotation would continue. Their knees ached, their ankles screamed, and if by chance the person in the second wheel next to them was more enthusiastic, throwing the crane off balance, both would have to strain to keep the rhythm, like a forced exercise class from the 14th century. There were no safety harnesses, no safety nets, only the howling wind up high, the birds swooping by, and a deep chasm below where the stone could pull a life down at any moment. Each step was like a whispered prayer, hoping the rope wouldn't rot, the wooden axle wouldn't break. The pay wasn't much, sometimes just a hot bowl of stew at the end of the day, if they still had the strength to hold a spoon. But they kept walking, kept stepping, knowing that each stone would become a part of the cathedral, of the towering spire where bells would ring for centuries. These structures might make people look up in awe, but how many would remember the sweat-drenched steps that helped lift them? Take a deep breath and exhale slowly. Let the sound of creaking wood fade into the void. You are no longer in that giant wheel. You are still lying peacefully in the warmth of your blankets. And as you gently open your imaginary eyes from the dark corners of the construction site, other small shadows emerge, not carrying ropes, not hauling stone, but carrying nets, a torch, and a small dog. They are not lifting stones to the sky, but crawling into dark cellars, facing a tiny but terrifying enemy, rats. The rat catchers, other silent heroes of the city. Leaving the construction site filled with the sound of creaking wood and heavy footsteps, you walk deeper into the city's dark alleys. There, hidden in damp corners, something always thrived, scurrying through every crack of warehouses, stables, and even the castle kitchens. Rats. Medieval rats were not like the cute creatures we sometimes see in fairy tales. They were larger, more aggressive, and carried fleas, the very culprits that spread the plague across Europe. Where there was food, there were rats, and where there were rats, there was a need for a rat catcher. Try to close your eyes. Imagine yourself stepping into a dim granary. The smell of grain mixes with the scent of damp mold. On the wooden beams, small eyes glint like embers. A rustling sound echoes from the sacks, accompanied by a frantic squeaking. The rat catcher stands there, a simple net in hand, a small hunting dog by his side, its ears pricked, waiting for the command. His job was not easy. Rats were quick, clever, and when cornered, they were as fierce as a larger animal. The rat catcher had to crawl into dark holes, reach his hands through wooden gaps, or lie flat on the ground just to grab a slippery tail. Sometimes, instead of a net, he would use a ferret, a small animal bred for hunting rats. releasing it into a dark burrow and waiting for the sounds of a struggle. You can imagine the small barks of the dog, the scuttling feet of fleeing rats, and the catcher's hasty shout as he swings his net. Sometimes in the silence, you could only hear ragged breathing and the smell of soot from a flickering torch. Danger was always lurking. A small bite could carry disease. A single flea jumping from a rat's back onto a person's clothes was enough to spread terror. The rat catcher knew this well, but he continued, because every rat caught meant a little more peace for the entire community. The pay was often meager, a few coins for each rat tail brought back. In some places, he had to prove his kills by tying the tails into bundles, like a gruesome kind of coupon. And though he was not respected, not welcomed at the market, he knew that without him, the rats would inherit the granaries and the entire city. Take a slow breath and exhale deeply. Let those rustling sounds fade away, leaving only the silence of the night. You are not facing the glinting eyes of rodents. You are still lying peacefully, warm, listening to this story like a whispered lullaby. And as you gently turn in your imagination, the scene changes again. Now there are no cesspits, no swamps, no rats, but a brightly lit room with silk carpets, books, and a noble child studying his lessons. Beside him, there is always a companion, not to study with, but to take the punishment for him. He was called the whipping boy. Now let your imagination carry you away from the damp, dark alleys through the heavy wooden gates of a castle. Inside, candlelight casts a golden glow on the stone walls. Thick carpets cover the floors, and the air is fragrant with gentle incense. In a small study, a noble child sits at a desk, a tutor before him, and right next to him is another boy of more humble appearance. He is the whipping boy. It sounds strange, but it's true. In the Middle Ages, a prince or a nobleman's son was too important, too sacred to be beaten when he made a mistake. So they chose a boy of the same age to be his companion, and also the one to receive the punishment in his place. Try to imagine. When the prince gets his Latin lesson wrong, it is not he who is whipped, but you, the whipping boy, who must bow your head and take the punishment. When the prince is rude to the tutor, the cane falls on your back, while he just sits there, sometimes even hiding a smile. This job was bizarre. To suffer pain, not for your own faults, but for someone else's. It was hoped that, because of their friendship, the prince would feel guilty seeing you punished for him. But whether that guilt ever came, no one could be sure. Close your eyes and hear the whoosh of the cane through the air, the thud against the wooden desk, the soft groan suppressed in your throat. The air in the room is as tense as a violin string. Only the candle continues to burn steadily, dripping wax onto its brass holder. On ordinary days, you had to follow the prince closely, study together, play together, ride horses together, even eat together. You were like his shadow, both a friend and a living shield. There was no promotion, no future title, only the hope that this friendship would save you from being forgotten. Even so, some whipping boys truly became the prince's confidants. Having gone through a childhood full of canings, they remained bonded for life, a friendship etched in pain and endurance. But for many others, they simply disappeared from history, their names forgotten, like a candle quietly extinguished. The reward for this job was not gold or silver. It was usually just being allowed to live in the castle, to eat well, wear clean clothes, and have a warmer place to sleep than the peasants outside. But the price was the bruises on your back, the nights spent sleeping on your side, afraid to turn over, and sometimes a young heart learning to endure for someone else. Take a deep breath, then exhale very slowly. Let the sound of the cane in your imagination fade, leaving only the gentle light of the candle. You are still here in your quiet room, free from fear, free from injustice. And as the candle burns down, we hear the wind change direction, carrying the smell of ash and a wave of heat. Out there, it is not the sting of a cane, but the blazing fire of a lime kiln, where lime burners toiled to turn stone into mortar in exchange for gasping breaths in the suffocating dust. Imagine you leave the candlelit study, step outside, and walk along the windy dirt road. In the distance, a bright red glow gradually appears, brighter than any lantern in town. It is the lime kiln, a large, circular pit of stone, as tall as a tower, spewing heat and thick ash into the night sky. The lime burner stands beside it, a shovel in hand, his thin cloak covered in white dust. With each scoop, he throws layers of limestone into the kiln, alternating with wood or peat. When the fire roars to life, a hissing sound echoes like a breathing monster, devouring everything. Try to close your eyes. Listen to the crackling of burning wood, the wind whistling through the kiln's vents. The air here is thick, acrid, making each breath feel like you're inhaling sand. With just a shift in the wind, hot ash can blow directly into your face, searing your skin. The danger doesn't stop there. Quicklime, after being fired, becomes volatile. The moment it touches water or sweat, it will bubble, hiss, and burn deep into the skin. A single drop of sweat could turn into a painful, non-healing burn. The lime burner is used to that feeling, used to the cracked calluses and the persistent dry cough in his chest. This job brought no glory. People don't remember the names of the lime burners, only the sturdy castle walls, the magnificent cathedrals, or even the plague pits covered in white lime. Lime was everywhere, in the foundations of houses, in the walls, in the fields. But how many people thought of those who burned away their own health to create it? Take a very deep breath and exhale very slowly. In your imagination, let that smell of smoke and dust dissipate, leaving only a faint night sky with a red ember fading in the distance like a tired star. You are not standing next to the kiln. You are still lying peacefully, safe in the silence of your room. And as your eyes flutter half closed, you see another scene appear, a graveyard in the mist, fresh graves and shadowy figures quietly digging, not to bury more, but to take away. These are the grave robbers, people who worked with death in a way just as strange and terrifying. Let your imagination carry you away from the red glow of the lime kiln. The dirt path leads to the graveyard on the edge of town, where the night wind blows through crooked tombstones, where a thick fog blankets everything, blurring the world like a dream. There, hunched figures with shovels dig silently, not to bury more of the dead, but to take them away. They are the grave robbers, not looking for gold, not hunting for jewelry, but for the entire corpse. Because in the newly established medical schools, physicians needed human bodies for dissection, to learn and understand life and death. But the church forbade it, and so this shady profession was born. Close your eyes, listen to the sound of the shovel digging into the wet earth, each heavy thud echoing in the mist. Each layer of dirt unearthed adds another layer of thick silence. The night is filled only with ragged breaths, the chirping of insects, and occasionally the long hoot of an owl, as if the heavens themselves knew what was happening. Grave robbers usually worked in pairs. One dug, one kept watch. The most precious time was within 48 hours after burial, when the earth hadn't settled and the body hadn't decomposed too much. They didn't need to unearth the whole coffin, just break open the wooden lid, pull the body out, and then hastily cover it up so the family wouldn't notice right away the next morning. Danger was always lurking. If caught, they could be fined, imprisoned, or even publicly shamed in the market square. In many places, the families of the deceased would even set traps in the grave. Iron bars, heavy stones, even mechanical contraptions, to prevent others from disturbing the final rest. But the demand from the medical schools was too great, and the money paid for an intact corpse was enough for the poor to take the risk. Try to breathe in very slowly and exhale very deeply. Imagine you are just standing at a distance, watching the hunched figures in the fog, their faces unclear, only seeing their thin backs bent over their work. Then the figures disappear into the night, taking their secret with them, leaving behind a carelessly covered, silent grave. No one erected statues for grave robbers. No one mentioned their names in prayers. But strangely, it was these very hands that quietly helped medicine take a step forward, even if the path they chose was never to be forgiven. Now let the sound of the shovel in your imagination fade away. You are still here, safe, in the familiar silence of your room. And as the night fog gently lifts, we hear another sound, very private, very hard to describe. It is a faint noise in a closed room, where a king sits on the strangest of thrones. A velvet-lined toilet chair. Beside him, there is always a special servant, with a secret task more important than anyone could imagine. He was called the groom of the stool. Let your imagination leave the damp, cold graveyard and travel back within the high city walls. There, in a splendid palace, are discreet rooms, lit by scented candles with silk carpets and velvet curtains. In that room, a different kind of throne is placed with reverence, the king's toilet chair. And there is always someone beside it, the groom of the stool. At first, this job sounds unbelievable. Their duty was to assist the monarch in his most private moments, from preparation to standing guard to helping to clean up after he was finished. But do not think this was a menial job. On the contrary, the person holding this position was often a nobleman, trusted implicitly by the king. Close your eyes, imagine the scene, the golden candlelight on the stone walls, the rustle of velvet, and in the center, the king on his peculiar throne. The groom of the stool stands close by, a clean linen cloth in hand, his eyes lowered, his face as serious as if attending a court meeting. Because here, discretion was more important than anything. This seemingly humiliating job brought with it a secret power. While the king was sitting, the groom was the only one who could approach, who could whisper news, and even decide who was allowed an audience. Many state secrets, many major political decisions were exchanged in this small room, while no one else was allowed near. Try to breathe in very slowly Then exhale and imagine the groom not only tended to the throne, but also managed the king's wardrobe, correspondence, and sometimes acted as an advisor. It all began with that strange intimacy which transcended even the distance of power. Of course, the job came with risks, a slip of the tongue, a poorly timed joke, or a look that failed to maintain its solemnity could end a career or even a life. Absolute loyalty, eternal silence. That was the unwritten law of this discreet throne. However, the rewards were not small. The groom of the stool lived in luxury, dined at the king's table, and was sometimes granted land and titles. They became influential figures, not because of swords and spears, but because they were beside the king in moments when no one else dared to be. Inhale, then exhale very slowly. Let that image fade away, leaving only a faint smile in your imagination. As strange as it was, this job also reminds us that power and intimacy sometimes appear in the most unexpected places. And as the door to that private room closes, you hear the clatter of a wooden spoon, the bubbling sound from a massive stew pot. In the hot castle kitchen, another figure is shouldering a great responsibility. The medieval cook, who keeps the entire court fed and hopefully not poisoned. Let your imagination leave that discreet room and its strange throne. Now we step down into the castle kitchen, a place not at all splendid, but hot, noisy, and more chaotic than any battlefield. Here, under the smoke-stained arches, is the world of the medieval cook. Try to close your eyes, listen to the clatter of knives and chopping boards, the sound of a wooden spoon stirring a bubbling pot. The smell of meat, fish, and wilted vegetables mixes with the thick, acrid smoke from the hearth, making the air dense, salty, and sometimes a little questionable. The ingredients the cook had to work with were not always fresh. Meat was often several days old, fish could have a stronger sea smell than necessary, and vegetables were wilted. Recipes of that time were very simple. Boil until mushy, add some expensive spices to mask the taste of spoilage, and then pray. Pepper, cinnamon, saffron, not to create a delicate flavor, but to make the dish at least swallowable. Try to imagine the scene of a great feast. 100 noble guests waiting, long tables covered in white linen, lively music playing. Down in the kitchen, the cook and his assistants are running frantically, lifting stew pots, kneading dough, roasting a whole pig on the fire, and making elaborate dishes like roasted swan or dragon-shaped pie. All in a cramped space, thick with smoke, with grease dripping from the ceiling, and shouts echoing all around. Faster, more. Danger was always present. Burns from splattering grease, cuts from sharp knives, and even food poisoning. A spoiled stew could not only ruin the feast, but could also have fatal consequences. And when that happened, who would be blamed? The cook, of course. Inhale slowly, then exhale gently. Even though the kitchen was full of risks, the cook patiently stirred every pot, tasted every spoonful, keeping the entire court fed. They were not praised like knights, their names were not carved like the church builders, but they were the ones who kept the rhythm of the entire palace alive. Every day, every meal, you lie still and let the image of that kitchen fade in your imagination. The bubbling sound quiets down, leaving only the sound of your steady breath. And as the smoke clears, you see another scene. A massive stone quarry, where the sound of hammers and chisels echoes like thunder. where giant blocks of stone are pulled from the earth. There, stonemasons are straining at their heavy work, one hammer blow at a time, building the very foundation of the medieval world. From the stuffy, smoky kitchen, we step outside, letting the cool night wind carry us to another place, a massive stone quarry. The moon hangs high, shining down on the rough gray cliffs, on deep crevices like scars on the face of the earth. There, figures with hammers and chisels bend over their work tirelessly. They are the stonemasons, the people who turned mountains into cathedrals, castles, and fortresses. Close your eyes, listen to the ringing clang of hammers, echoing off the cliffs, lingering in the night air. The sound of loose gravel rolling, falling into the deep pit. Each hammer blow not only takes a piece of stone, but also a piece of strength, a breath, a bit of the mason's youth. The work began before the sky was fully light. They would drill into natural cracks, drive in wooden wedges, then pour cold water, letting the force of nature split the stone. When the stone cracked, they would use hammers and chisels to pry massive blocks from the earth. No machines, only human strength, and a patience as enduring as time itself. Every breath here was thick with dust. Dust got into their hair, their teeth, their clothes, covering their skin in a white film. No goggles, no masks, only eyes squinting under the harsh sun, and lungs inhaling the dry, gritty air. Sometimes a stone chip would fly straight into a face, leaving a deep scar. And worst of all were the sudden collapses. A small crack, and then a whole block of stone would come crashing down, burying their labor, and sometimes their lives. The pay was meager, a few coins in exchange for a stooped back, calloused hands, and breath that grew heavier over time. But it was these very stones that, after many years, became magnificent cathedrals, grand castles, or bridges that carried people across rivers. The stonemason was anonymous, but his work stood there, steadfast through the centuries. Take a very deep breath and exhale very slowly. In your imagination, let the sound of the stone hammers fade into the distance, leaving only silence. You are still lying peacefully, no stone dust, no clanging noise. Only your slow, steady breath. And as the night deepens from the horizon, we hear the sound of galloping hooves, the wind whistling on the road, and a figure clutching a leather scroll to his chest. He is a wartime messenger, carrying news in desperate times, running between life and death to deliver the king's word in time. From the dusty quarry, we let the wind carry us to a wide road, where the moonlight stretches out like a silver cloth. Suddenly, from the distance, the sound of galloping hooves rings out. A rider rushes past, his cloak fluttering, his hand tightly gripping a leather scroll. He is a wartime messenger, one who carries life or death news during fierce days. Close your eyes, imagine the sound of hooves clattering on the cobblestone road, mingling with the whistling wind and the frantic beating of a heart in a chest. The messenger's job sounds simple: carry a message from one place to another. But in times of turmoil, every journey was a gamble with fate. He had to cross dark forests where robbers lay in wait. He had to cross open fields where enemy archers were just waiting for a figure to appear. He had to ride through rain, through storms, even across battlefields, still shrouded in gunpowder smoke, just to deliver an order in time. A moment's delay, and an entire army could fall. Try to take a deep breath, then exhale slowly. Hear the wind whipping past your ears, the sound of your cloak flapping. Imagine a tightening grip, cold sweat mixing with road dust. Every gallop of the horse is a prayer. Please let no arrow find its mark. Please let the enemy not see me. Upon arrival, there was no glory. The messenger would simply bow his head, hand over the scroll, and turn back. Often, it was immediate, back on the road with a new scroll, another life and death journey. No audience, no applause. Only the darkness, a tired horse, and weary eyes. The pay for this job was better than a farmer's, but the danger was 100 times greater. Many messengers fell along the way, their bodies lost in the forest, their names forgotten. Only the undelivered messages remained, drifting on the wind like whispers of history. Inhale slowly, exhale steadily. Let the sound of those hooves fade into the distance, leaving only a vast silence. You are not riding a horse, not running through the night. You are still lying peacefully, warm in your soft, dark room. And as the night grows stiller, we hear a steady clang from a glowing forge, accompanied by flying sparks. It is the familiar rhythm of the blacksmith, the one who turns raw metal into tools, weapons, and hope for a community. Let your imagination take us to another corner of the town. Night has fallen, but there, a bright red light still shines from a low forge. The bellows puff, and the sound of a hammer strikes clang, 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 echoing steadily. This is the workplace of the blacksmith, a man who lives his life in heat, the sound of steel and flying sparks. Try to close your eyes. Listen to the steady rhythm of the hammer, like an ancient drum. With each strike, the red-hot metal bar gradually bends, transforming into a new tool, a plowshare, a horseshoe, a sword. Sweat streams down, falling onto the damp earth, instantly turning to a thin white steam. In the firelight, the blacksmith's face is smudged with soot, his eyes glowing like embers. His work is the backbone of the entire community. Farmers need plowshares to till the fields. Knights need swords and armor for battle. Builders need nails, hinges, and iron hooks. Without the blacksmith, the entire town would grind to a halt. But to create these items, he pays a price with his calloused hands, his ears slowly going deaf from the sound of metal and the web of burns on his arms. Danger is ever present. A broken piece of iron could fly into his face. A hot ember falling on his shirt could turn into a deep burn. Occasionally, the forge itself would flare up, like an untamed dragon, forcing the blacksmith to jump back. But he always returns, always strikes the hammer, because the work never stops. Take a very deep breath, then exhale slowly. In your imagination, let the ringing hammer fade like a sound wave drifting away, leaving only silence. The blacksmith continues to strike his hammer, but you can only hear your own breath, slow and steady. And then, as the sound of the hammer subsides, we see another path open up. On a dirt road under the moonlight, a wanderer in a cloak, a lute on his back, a small bag in hand. He does not dig, does not forge, does not carry heavy loads. He lives by his song, by his poetry, by his rhyming stories. He is the minstrel, the one who carries his music to every corner of the Middle Ages. Let your imagination carry us away from the glowing forge, out onto the cobblestone road under the moonlight. On the road, a figure in a worn cloak, holding a battered lute. He is the minstrel, the one who brings songs, poems, and stories to every corner of the Middle Ages. Close your eyes, listen to the gentle strumming of the lute strings. blending with a simple voice. The song is not just for entertainment. It could be a love ballad about a long-lost princess, or a battle hymn praising the deeds of a knight. But it could also be a playful satire about a stingy lord, making the crowd roar with laughter in a smoky tavern. The life of a minstrel was not easy. They wandered from village to village, sometimes full, sometimes hungry. One night, they might be invited to perform in a candlelit great hall before dozens of silk-clad nobles. The next night, they might have to stand in the corner of a noisy inn, dodging thrown turnips just to earn a piece of dry bread. Danger was also ever present. A wrong lyric could be taken as an insult. A clumsy rhyme could get them chased out of the village or even punished. But they kept singing because their song was the only ticket they had to survive. Inhale slowly, then exhale steadily. Imagine the gentle music carrying you to a distant place where stories and music intertwine, like a warm blanket on a cold winter's night. The minstrel left no castles, built no walls, forged no swords, but they left memories. They were the stream of news, of legends, of dreams. It was they who kept the stories alive, so that hundreds of years later, we can still hear the faint echo of those old days. And now, as you listen to that song fade into the darkness, our story comes to a close. Take one more deep breath, exhale slowly, and let your eyes close completely. You are no longer in the alleys, swamps, kilns, or taverns of the Middle Ages. You are in your own bed, warm and peaceful. May you have a deep and gentle sleep, like the song of the minstrel fading into the night. My dear friend, we have just journeyed together through a long night, listening to stories of the worst jobs of the Middle Ages. From the dark cesspits and cold swamps to the burning kilns and the minstrel's song, it all shows us that no matter the circumstances, people always strive to live, to survive. Now you are no longer in that dusty, foul-smelling place. All that remains is your own slow, steady breath in your quiet room. Allow your body to rest, and let gentle dreams carry you far away. Sleep well. May your night be as peaceful as a distant song. And when you wake, you will find yourself lighter, more serene, ready for a new day. Good night.